will do that. There it goes.
Okay, and I'm gonna, all right. Continue. This is good. So welcome everybody. I'm glad you could come. I'm excited to be here. One of the things that I like to start off with is why we should get organized. And of course, I have to show my family off. This is my kids and my grandkids and all of that. But they're the big reason why I got organized in the first place. You know, there are 12 million older adults in this country that live alone. You know, that means that your older relatives, your adults, your grandmothers, your aunts, all of those kinds of people. And about 70% of older adults are living alone, and they're women. In most households too, one spouse is likely to pay all the bills in a household. And if you're like my family, chances are it's you who's taking care of all of the responsibilities, paying bills and all of that. And the other thing is we're living in a society where children don't live in the same state as their parents or their siblings any longer. They're all over the place. My kids are in Chicago, Chattanooga, Springfield, Virginia. So they're all over the place. And pardon? Did you say something?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. You know, and you know, I'm sure there's a lot of you who are in this same situation where you've got, you're at home, you're responsible for your families, your parents, your in-laws, all of that kind of stuff. So another thing that I was surprised to learn is that emergency room visits there are so many of them. In the United States, in 2018, and these were statistics from the CDC, there were 35 million people who went to an emergency room for an injury. And of those visits, 16.2 million of them resulted in a hospital stay, and 2.3 million of those resulted in a critical care admission. So if you think about that, that's 12% of all emergency room visits that result in an overnight stay in a hospital. And a lot of times we're not prepared for that. You know, I have had this happen to me. I'm sure many of you have had this happen to you as well. You know, my mother ended up in the hospital for twice. The first time she was in a coma for 28 days, and the second time she was in the hospital for 4 months before she died. That was very traumatic because she didn't live in the same city I lived in. I ended up being in St. Louis and having to take care of all of the things I'm talking to you about today. My name is Deb Miller, as Jennifer said. I'm an author, speaker, consultant. I'm a member of a number of disaster recovery organizations, and this is all very personal and comes out of my own experience as a mother, as a daughter, as a grandmother. So that's why this all came about. I am not an attorney. Please seek legal advice from a qualified person for all of the stuff that I'm talking to you about today. I am really providing this information for educational purposes. Please be aware that, you know, I'm not giving legal advice at all, but from my own experience, I'm sharing the information and what I've learned over the years. All right, how many of you have a document that in case of an emergency, you have your phone numbers, the name and address and the phone numbers and the relationships of people who need to be contacted if something would happen to you in an emergency? I highly recommend everybody write out a 3x5 card and put it on your refrigerator. if something happens to you and the EMS comes, the emergencies people have to come, an ambulance, they're going to look on your refrigerator to see if if you have written down somebody's name to be contacted in case of an emergency. So this is the first thing I recommend everybody do. It's easy to do. There doesn't have to be any kind of specific form that you would use. Just make sure that you have an in case of an emergency written down someplace. Okay. Let's see. So here are the 5 documents that every family needs to have. You need to have guardianship documents, a last will and testament, a living will, sometimes called an advance directive, and a couple of different kinds of powers of attorney. And we'll talk about each one of these as we go through here. And if you have questions, I'm not seeing the chat box on my screen. So Jennifer, if you'll kind of monitor that, I'd really appreciate that. If there's anybody.
I will do that. I'll do that.
Okay.
Nothing there yet. Nothing there now.
Okay, great. The first thing you really need to be aware of, do you have guardianship documents? And there's a difference between custody and guardianship. So custody is parental rights. That's what you would have as a parent or a mother or a father, okay? But you might have, if something would happen to you and you have young children, you really need to be aware that the court can appoint somebody to take care of your children if you are unable to do so. This applies to differently abled children and adults, or if you have an adult that you're taking care of, like a mother or a father or something like that, that's a court-determined guardianship that you're responsible for, you really need to have some kind of document in place that says what's going to happen to the children, who's going to take care of them, who's going to make decisions about their health, about their finance, where they're going to live, how they're going to go to school, all of that kind of stuff. It can be, this document can be part of a will, but it doesn't have to be. It can be simply a document that's filled out by an attorney and registered with the courts if something would happen to your children or somebody that you're responsible for. You really need to make sure that you keep a note about the fact that you have a guardianship document available for somewhere close by so that people will know that when it happens. Because if you don't have a guardianship document, somebody else is going to make the decision for you. And think about it. If you have small kids, are your parents or your in-laws capable of taking care of your children? Maybe, maybe not. Guardianship could go to somebody who, speaks up and says, yes, I want to take care of the kids. Are they doing it because they want to take care of the kids? Or are they doing it because there's some money involved and they're financially going to benefit from having the care of your children? So you really need to ask some really tough questions and get your guardianship information together and understand what it involves and who could be responsible for your kids if you're not able to do so. All right, the last will and testament, everybody knows they should have a last will and testament. And when you get a will done, it really is telling people who is going to inherit your possessions, who's going to take over your bank accounts, who's going to take over your property, who are your beneficiaries. You can have a guardianship within your last will and testament, but understand that that won't go into effect until you have passed away. So having a separate guardianship document outside of your last will makes some sense, especially if it's just because you're incapacitated at the time. Some questions to ask are, who's going to be the executor of your will? Is this going to be a position that's compensated? Maybe you don't have anybody in your family that you really trust to do a good job as an executor. Maybe they're older, maybe they just aren't capable or financially savvy. You might want to hire somebody to be the executor of your will. It could be an attorney, it could be a bank, it could be a lot of different kinds of places. So that's something to think about. In Indiana, you only need 2 witnesses who will sign the document after you have signed your part of it. And that's all you need in Indiana is 2 witnesses. You don't have, it doesn't have to be notarized. It doesn't have to have anything else. The other thing you want to make sure if you have a last will and testament is that it's easily accessible. You want people to be able to find it, because a lot of times you put in there things that probably shouldn't be there. And for example, if you put your last, what you want to happen at a funeral in your will, chances are it'll get read, the will get read after your funeral sometime. So think about the kinds of things that need to go in it. And that's why I recommend going with an attorney whenever possible, because that way you get the best information and you have the right information to make a will that's going to be beneficial to your heirs. The other thing you can do in place of a will is have a revocable trust. What that does is it allows you to retain control over your estate while making transfers of assets to other people. It allows you to avoid probate. So, if you're giving things away, your property, that kind of thing, it does not have to go through probate or through the court, and it can act as in the place of a will. It can also make potential guardianship unnecessary if it's taken care of. You can have all of that information written in the trust. Understand you don't have to be rich to have a trust. If you have a life insurance policy that's $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 or more, you might want to have that money in a trust, because it doesn't go through probate, and you can do some other documents to make it make the transfer from one person to the other very easy. You can put your house in a revocable trust. You can put your vehicles in a trust. My parents did that, and it was so easy because all 5 of my siblings, we live in different states. So there's 2 of us in Indiana and 2 in Missouri and 1 in Kansas. And when we went through the process of divvying up all the resources after my parents passed, it was a very simple process because we had it all in a revocable trust. So that's something to think about. The third document that everybody needs to have is what we call a living will or an advance directive. And this, you have one of these because it allows you to share your wishes with somebody else about your medical care at the end of your life. Tells people what to do when you can't physically do it. It helps family members make decisions about things like palliative care, which is making people comfortable at the end of their life rather than taking all kinds of doing any means available to keep you alive. It talks about when to resuscitate you, when not to, when to put you on a ventilator or give you feeding treatments, whatever. It allows you to make those decisions in a way that you can share the information with your family, with your doctor, with the hospital, all of those people. And it helps prevent disagreements if a situation is contentious. And, some families get along just fine. Others, one sibling may say, oh, I want everything done possible, and I want to be kept comfortable in my final days. So you have to make those kind of trade-offs, and having an advance directive, a living will help guide those decisions going forward. And you don't have to be old to have one of these. You should probably have them young people as well. There are several types of powers of attorney that you can have, and there's a general power of attorney. I don't know if anybody realizes this. It ends if you are incapacitated. So if you just have a power of attorney and somebody to do something for you, like manage a business or whatever, if you become incapacitated, that power of attorney is no longer valid. It disappears. So what you need to have is what we call a durable power of attorney. And a durable power of attorney allows that person to make those decisions if you're incapacitated. And then there's other types of powers of attorney, and one is a specific power of attorney, and that is what we talk about when we talk about a medical power of attorney. It's very specific to what can and can't be done for you if you are unable to make decisions on your own. A common one that we talk about is the healthcare power of attorney. And you want to have a representative who will be able to talk to your doctors and make valid decisions about what needs to happen for you. You need it to be somebody who is responsible and who will honor your wishes. So, if you've got 5 kids, you may want to say, all right, this one child is going to make all the decisions after getting input from all the others, because you want to make sure that there's not a lot of infighting and that there is one person who you trust to be responsible. These are only applicable when a person is determined to be permanently unconscious, terminally ill, or seriously incapacitated in some fashion. So if you go to the hospital for a broken arm, nobody's going to be able to come in as your healthcare power with a healthcare power of attorney and do something that you don't want. The laws for powers of attorney vary by state, but the difference between a power of attorney and a living will is if you're temporarily unconscious, the person designated in the living will cannot make healthcare decisions for you. You need someone who has a medical power of attorney. So it's a little different. Does that make sense to everybody? Do you see the difference between the two? Is there any questions about that?
Say it one more time, Deb.
Okay, so if you're temporarily unconscious, so you've had an accident, the person who's designated in the living will as your representative cannot make healthcare decisions for you. You need to have someone who has a medical power of attorney to do that.
Okay. Gotcha.
The living will person is really looking at the end of your life and trying to decide what's going to happen and how your care is going to move forward. A healthcare power of attorney helps make those medical decisions if you can't. So do you need to be on a ventilator? Do you need to have surgery to save your life? Do you need to have a feeding tube? Those kinds of things are made by your healthcare power of attorney person. The living will person is the one who kind of guides the process along, but they don't really have a lot of power. It's the power of attorney is the one that does. You still want to have the living will, because that helps guide everybody who's given you care, but the healthcare power of attorney is the most important of the documents.
Okay, thank you.
And then a financial power of attorney is different. And you want this to be a durable power of attorney as well. If you're unable to manage your financial needs, it allows you to designate somebody to come in and help make legal decisions for you. So if you go into a nursing home, you need a financial power of attorney who can sell your home, who can disperse your assets to, have an estate sale, do all of that kind of stuff. The financial power of attorney person also can write the checks and pay your bills and make sure that you don't lose your house or your insurance because you don't pay the bills that are coming through. And as people become, if somebody has dementia or is starting to lose their ability to do daily, tasks like this, it's really important to have somebody who has a financial power of attorney that can come in and help you figure it out. You get to determine when this document goes into effect. So you can upfront say, if I'm incapacitated, somebody can do this. You can put some restrictions on it. It becomes durable if you want the spouse or someone else to always have the power and the power at some stage of your incapacity to take over. So you need to be careful when you're selecting the person who's becoming your power of attorney. Again, this can be a bank, it can be an attorney. There's other ways that you can move this process through, but you really should have somebody who has the ability, if you're incapacitated, to take over. And you want it to be somebody who you really trust. So don't just say, oh, my youngest child needs some money, so I'll let him be the power of attorney. No, make sure you understand who, that the person who you're giving this power to is responsible. Let's just say that. I know my mom didn't have one and I signed checks because my signature looks a lot like hers. So we just continued to write checks while she was in the hospital, but that wasn't the best way to do things. So I don't recommend it. Some other important documents that you might want to think about having besides those 5 are a DNR, a do not resuscitate. If you have terminal cancer, if you have a terminal disease, you might want to have a DNR and have it available so that people aren't doing heroic measures to try to bring you back if you're at the end stages of your life. A beneficiary deed is another one that could be an important piece. And this is if you have some property. So say you have a timeshare somewhere, you can identify who's going to inherit your real estate, your property, anything that's not held in trust. It will end up in probate. Having a beneficiary deed, I think, helps prevent some of that because you're deeding it over at a designated time to a designated person. Make sure you have your beneficiary designations on everything, your IRA, your bank accounts, your credit cards, everything that you have any kind of money associated with. You want to make sure that you have the beneficiary designations on it. Make sure they're the same on all your documents. So if if you have, for example, my IRA has my husband as the first person, and then it has my 3 children as the secondary beneficiaries. Make sure that they're the same on all the the documents that you're talking about, because otherwise it starts to get a little muddied up if the beneficiaries aren't the same on your insurance, your life insurance, your pensions, any of that kind of stuff. So just make sure you're very clear about who's on what, because we often forget about it. And I know at one point my Fidelity account dropped all the beneficiaries on it. For some strange reason, they all disappeared. And we had to go back through and re-enter everything. So it's a good idea to check every once in a while just to make sure everything is the way you want it. HIPAA authorizations. You can sign a form, and when you go to the hospital, they're going to ask you for it anyway. But you can, at your doctor's offices, any place that you want, you can make sure that you have a HIPAA form that you have designated whoever you want to have access to your medical records. So, for example, my daughter is on my HIPAA records, so that if something would happen to me, she needs to talk to the doctor, she needs to get a death certificate, something like that, she has the authorization to get it. She can talk to them. Your checking and savings account can have something called a pay upon death, so that you can, when something happens to you, that money gets to the person who needs to have access to it. It's not the same as having a shared account. And then there's a form called transfer upon death at the Department of Motor Vehicles, where you can have your cars, the title to your car transferred upon your death to whoever you designate. So another form that you might want to think about. And the other thing is having some kind of an asset inventory somewhere. This can be something that you keep track of all of the things that are important. Do you have jewelry? Do you have artwork? Do you have gold coins somewhere? Do you have, what kind of assets do you have? It might be my mother collected Hummels, and she must have had 500 of them. And so we had to, she had a list of all of those assets, and having that kind of an inventory is really important for a lot of different reasons. An easy way to do it is to, if you're not going to have a digital copy of it, is to go through your house and videotape, open drawers, open closets, make a videotape of your house so that you can see what kind of assets you hold. And then you can have a personal property memorandum, which is what you put together that's stuff that you want people to have. So for example, I have my wedding ring. So upon my death, I can have a personal property memorandum that goes with my will that says, I want my oldest daughter to have my wedding ring. I want my youngest child to have the gold coin in the lockbox, whatever that might be. So they're personal. It's typically non-monetary in terms of, it's the paintings, it's the guns you might have, it's whatever you have that you've got personal property that you want somebody to have specifically, that's what you would put into a document, and you can attach it to your will. It doesn't have to be a separate document. It should be a separate document, because you want to be able to change it if conditions change. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Any questions? I got a couple more things. Okay. Everybody should have an emergency folder. It looks like this. I got this one at Office Depot. It has several different things in it, or file folder things. You need to have this so that if you have to go to the emergency room, you go to a doctor's office, you go somewhere else, you can have all of the information that you're going to need. It's going to have a signed copy of your living will. It's going to have a list of all of your physicians, what the doctors are, what they treat you for, all of that kind of stuff. You should have copies of your insurance cards. It should have a list of all your medications that you're taking. It should have a list of all of the family contacts, everybody you want to be able to notify that there's an emergency going on. And you're going to say, well, it's in my phone. Well, maybe if your phone's still charged, you can get to it. I've been in emergency room situations where I had no access. My phone died and I didn't have a way to charge it because my charger wasn't with me. So make sure you have a list of all of those important people. And, we used to memorize everybody's phone number. I used to know, I still know the number of my house when I lived in Indianapolis when I was a teenager. But do I know my sister's phone number? Not a clue. I don't, because I pull it up on my phone and I punch the button and it dials her. So we don't have that list anymore. You should also have your healthcare power of attorney. You don't need your financial power of attorney at the point when you need this, but you need to be able to pack this and go in an instant if something would happen, rather than trying to find it all. Sometimes the hospitals, if you go to the same one all the time or you use the same, like IU Health, they may have a copy of it already on your file, but for them to find it sometimes is very difficult. So that's why you keep all of this stuff in an emergency folder so you don't have to think about it. You can just go. So the other question is, should you use an attorney or can you do it yourself? If depends on the complexity of your situation. I would say, for my husband and I, we're pretty simple. Everything goes to share and share like to my three kids, and they can figure out what the grandkids and all of that get. But if you have a lot of assets that are over a certain dollar amount, it can be more difficult. The decision is whether you need to go through probate or can you set up a trust. I would have an attorney set up the trust. I wouldn't try that on my own. There are a lot of potential errors that can happen when you do it yourself. And a lot of it depends on where your family is located, what state you're in, whether or not that makes a lot of sense. So here are some things that can go wrong when you're doing your will yourself. And I want you to kind of think about it. Naming the executor to your will. You need to make sure that you're picking the person who is going to do the best job for you. And you want somebody who is smart enough that can deal with lawyers and can deal with, situations that might come up. You don't want to give it to someone who struggles financially or struggles to manage their own life. You want to make sure you're picking somebody that has your best interests in heart. Never leave your estate to a pet. If you have a pet and you want to take care of that, make sure you give it to somebody and give them some money to take care of your dog. Do not leave your estate to your pet. Another problem is when you put conditions on your heirs to receive a payout. So if you're saying, my son can't inherit unless he gets a 4-year college degree, that's putting a condition that could be thrown out. So you want to make sure you're making good choices with that. Designating unusual end-of-life decisions can also be a problem. This is where you don't want to be put on life support. But remember that wills aren't read until after you're dead. So putting your last wishes in your will likely means that they're going to not be even paid attention to because it's after the fact. Designating guardians for your children. We already talked about that. The coordination of beneficiary designations can be a problem. Putting your funeral instructions in your will is also can be kind of iffy because your will, you may get buried or cremated or whatever before your will is even read, before anybody finds it. So that's a problem. And the other issue is dealing with blended families. You know, if you've had a divorce, you got kids from two families, and who gets what, when, and where. It can all be can all go wrong if you don't do it right. In those cases, that is a time that I would definitely get a lawyer involved. So where do you get discount legal advice? You can go to places like Rocket Lawyer, LegalZoom, and Legal Shield. These are some very reputable places for online help. They have forms, they'll lead you through the whole process. I wouldn't hesitate to use any of these for a simple case. If it's something that's very complicated, if somebody needs a referral, then I can give you the name of someone who deals with elder law and who is very reputable and doesn't charge an arm and a leg. So those are all kinds of things you might want to think about. So the other thing I have is my book called My Life Organizer. And you have an older copy, Jennifer. I got the new title, the new book.
Okay.
It's the same content, it's a prettier book.
Gotcha.
I have a different. And basically what this is, it's a workbook. It leads you through the whole process of all of the information that you should collect for whatever happens to you. It can, everything from your mortgage and your homeowners association and your cars and your who your doctors and your lawyers are, and where your bank is, and what installment loans do you have. All of that information is a place in here for you to keep track of all of that information. You can buy it on Amazon. It's My Life Organizer. You can find it with my name. Or if you send me an email, I'll get you a copy for $10. So that's
go ahead. I'm sorry. Can you, go ahead. There, your contact information's right there. Good.
Yeah. And then finally, the other service that I offer is something new. This is kind of new. I help people get their paperwork organized. If you have an elderly person in your family and you just don't have time to go through all the file drawers and in the cabinets and the drawers and whatever to find all of the information, I can come to your house, scan the documents into a USB drive and help you get everything organized for you. That helps you, you need to do this, you just don't have time to do it. So that's a service that the new service that I'm offering. So who has questions?
You know what? I was just going to say, hold on just a second. Robert had a comment in there that said none. And I think he was responding to something you asked, but I don't know what the question was. So not really sure. So I don't know, Robert, if you're hearing me, were you responding?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, she had asked a question. I was going to have a question. She's great content, great information, great reminder and definitely good organization, what you're offering here. I do that to a customer when I was doing reverse mortgages. I spent a lot of that time with a lot of the clients that I dealt with, as far as understanding that more of the senior people I dealt with.
Yeah, it's so hard. And, it's hard for our seniors our parents, our, grandparents to get online, get organized, get stuff in a fashion that makes sense for you. And it makes it easy to organize. I know I had problems when my husband was in the hospital here for 2.5 months in Indianapolis, and we were living in Fort Wayne at the time, and trying to manage a household with all my information and all my bills being sent to my house in Fort Wayne and being down here at the hospital, day in and day out was challenging. And that's how this whole thing came about. So
Deb, I've been telling this story about how your husband was hospitalized in another town and you had to come up with this whole thing. So I made it sound like you, but so what was the story is that
he was on the liver transplant list.
Okay.
And he was only on it for 2.5 weeks, which was amazing.
Yes.
He got called, and I was in Valparaiso working, and he was in Fort Wayne, and we had to come together and be in Indianapolis within 3 hours. And it was the middle of the night, how all of those things go. And I really didn't have anything with me. I wasn't prepared. I didn't have any of the information. It was anything that was available on my computer that I could remember. And trying to get, at that time, everything was mailed. All my bills were mailed to my house. So it was a matter of trying to figure out how to get my bills paid and how to keep my household going.
Yeah.
When I wasn't there, and it happened when my mom was in the hospital. I ended up in St. Louis for 2 or 3 months while she was in the hospital, trying to take care of her and doing rehab. And fortunately, my husband was okay at that point and he could take care of a lot of it. But, there's stuff, think about it. Does your spouse know where everything is? Could they find all the information and have it at hand and ready to go? Most of the time, the answer is no. They might have some idea, but they don't really have a good information. So that's how it all came about.
Gotcha.
And I'm happy to help people who need help, because I just know it's so stressful, especially when you're going through a period of time where people are ill or an emergency happens. You just don't have the bandwidth. You just don't have the ability,
right,
to function.
Well, our theme this month has been Jot It Down. So when Deb and I were talking a couple months ago, I said, that would be great because that kind of goes along. We'll stretch the theme a little, but it actually fits very well, because if you're going to get organized, you might as well, get organized, right? Get it in, this is being recorded, and I would encourage you I do have her book, the old version. I thought mine looked like a newfangled version. Yours does look a little better than mine does, but so it is not my life, but Life Organizer Coach and Deborah C. Miller. She's also a member of our TTR Westfield group. So I know you got, yes, I was gonna say you got.
Janice is here, and I think Sammy was here. So
cool. That's cool.
I have 2 things. One, it's not just for seniors. I bought Deb's book and gave it to my son, who lives alone. And his daughter lives alone in an apartment. And as we were talking through my whole situation, it's like, what are you going to leave for Jenna? If something would happen to you, any kind of accident or anything, she won't have a clue of what's going on with you. So he was very happy to get the book. I am going to forward him the recording too. And my second point is the red folder. If I would have known that, I should have known that, 6 months ago. When Indy went into the hospital, we have all of those documents. We've gone to another attorney, we've had all that stuff. But when we went to the emergency room, that was nowhere on my radar. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks. It was nowhere on my radar. And then when he went into the rehab and long-term care, again, no one ever asked me if he had any of those documents. And I was in such a state that I wasn't thinking about documents. So having that red folder, and I'm going to get one, I'm going to post it on my bulletin board so that my kids can have it, because like I said, nobody asked me at the long-term care. And then when he had his issue, they had on the chart full code.
Yep.
So if they could have, they weren't able to resuscitate him, but if they had, I mean, they would have kept on going and kept him on life support forever. And that wasn't his wish. But
Yeah.
For that 6 weeks, documents were not on my brain. So
Yeah,
it's good to have them, but it's also good to put them somewhere where you see them every day. Because mine's in a folder in a drawer.
yeah. Or at least let people know you have it and where it's at. So if your
My kids know where it's at, but nobody ever asked me at the hospital, at long-term care, or in the rehab center. Nobody ever asked me for any kind of documentation, which
I'm really surprised because they're
my
supposed
bad.
to
Yeah,
ask.
my bad. I didn't say we have this.
Yeah,
Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
thank you.
Yeah.
I believe in it. It's like I said, mine's right here, got all my forms. It's out on my desk all the time. So I know, because I know where it is and need to be able to take it with me.
Yeah.
And if you're one of those prepared people who have a go bag or something like that, keeping it with your go bag is always another good idea as well. So those who are into that kind of stuff, it's another place to put it.
You're awesome. That's awesome. I am going to, we'll post this. I don't post it directly on the website, but I'll send it so it'll be on there pretty soon. But this group that's been on here, I will send you a specific, or I'm going to send you an email. And if you don't have Deb's information, please, it's pretty simple. Deb@debcmiller.com is pretty easy. And Deb has been, what did you just do? You did wilderness training, didn't you, or something?
I did.
Crazy woman?
I did search and rescue.
Search and rescue.
Search and rescue training. So I was up in the wood, in wilderness survival kind of stuff. So I was up in the woods for 3 weekends in Michigan and here, and I had a ball. I love doing that stuff, but yeah.
So I saw her before she was about to head, or we were talking, I think, before you headed out. So you're still smiling. You seem like you're in good spirits. So you must have done okay.
I passed.
All right.
I was one of the older ones in the team, but I passed. So
good for you. I'm excited. Well, thank you, everybody. And let's see. I have just there's like 5 minutes. Does anybody have any other questions? Yeah. Joe, I'm so glad you're on this call, because I would have thought, yes, Joe and Deb need to meet each other. Have you ever met each other?
No.
Oh, you'll have to meet each other. I'll let Joe tell you at your meeting, but yeah, I'm glad. We'll do this again, Deb, I'm sure. And we did have, there's always people that sign up that don't show up. So unfortunately, but it's very nice to see everybody who's on here, and hopefully you'll reach out to Deb. And this is our first, what we call TTR Presents, and it's to the Rescue Networking, but it's TTR for short. And next month, I will say the last Monday of August, we have another wonderful presentation by Linda Lewis. Right now, I can't tell you the whole thing, but it's going to be, because she's coming up, but in August, our theme is awesome testimonials and authenticity, but she's going to help people write or give you some ideas of how to get some awesome testimonials and that kind of thing. Now, her business is cashoverlooked.com. So if you want to go look for her, she's in our Building Beyond Networking. So we're trying to highlight our members, and anybody who is a member, we'd be happy to have you come and volunteer to speak. And we'd love to have more than just one a month. But Deb and I talked a couple months ago, and I just felt like it fit right into this really well. And so I'm just very happy that everybody was able to be on. I'm going to double check the chat, but I think it's just people telling you that you're awesome, Deb. That's pretty much what they're saying.
Thank you, everybody. It was my pleasure.
You are awesome.
That's right. There you go.
It was good. It was
Thanks,
great.
Tammy.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a wonderful evening. Thanks for being on, Joe and Janice and Sammy and Deb and Robert and Don. Kim, I think I covered it. I don't know if I missed you. I'm sorry. Have a great day, great evening, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.